The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And today is indeed my birthday, a birth date that I share with President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now, there's a certain irony in that because in 2013, I wrote a book called The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, in which I used eyewitness evidence, fingerprint evidence, and deep Texas politics to make the case that LBJ had the motive, means, and the opportunity to helm a plot, notice I didn't use the word conspiracy, that involved the Central Intelligence Agency, organized crime, Big Texas Oil, and other major financial interests in the murder of President John F. Kennedy, Jr. So I took that book to 6 different publishers. They all told me that it had no commercial appeal, that it would never be successful. But within weeks of it being published, it became a New York Times bestseller. And I can honestly say that none of the documents that have been released on the basis of an order by President Donald Trump that the National Archives release all of their documents pertaining to the murder of JFK disprove anything, which is to say that the man who shot from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building was Malcolm Mac Wilson. Malcolm Mac Douglas. Mac Wallace was the shooter. We know this because he left his fingerprints on the cardboard boxes that formed the crow's nest from which the shooter shot. We know that it is Malcolm Wallace's fingerprints because he was arrested in 1951 when he murdered a man named John Douglas Kinzer in broad daylight. Kinzer was trying to blackmail Senator Lyndon Johnson, threatening to expose corruption by the senator and also his involved in election theft. Wallace was also seen by 6 different eyewitnesses, 3 of them in the jail across the way from the Texas School Book Depository building. 3 other witnesses, they all identify a man who meets the physical description of Malcolm Mac Wallace. Middle set, balding, every single one of them says wearing glasses. Wallace had the highest possible rating as a marksman, as a Marine Corps veteran. Then there's the man on the ground who sees Wallace departing the office. His name was James Carr. Carr made the mistake of reporting what he had seen, Malcolm Wallace rushing out of the Texas School Book Depository, driving away in a Nash Rambler. He told both the FBI and the FBI there would be both 6 different attempts on Mr. Carr's life before identifying the real killer. Since then, of course, Paramount has released a documentary in which the various doctors who attended John F. Kennedy at Parkland Hospital in Dallas all said that they saw wounds consistent with JFK being shot from the front and the back, but they were all warned that for their own good, they should keep their mouth shut. In any event, a happy birthday to President Lyndon Johnson. It is with great irony that I have exposed what I think is the truth about the assassination of one of our greatest presidents, John F. Kennedy. The big news today, of course, is that President Donald Trump has fired the Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook after she was accused by the director of Federal Housing's Finance Agency, Bill Pulte, for mortgage fraud. Now, very specifically, what Lisa Cook did was to claim that her home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was her principal legal resident. Therefore, she got a state tax break, a lower mortgage rate, and a lower insurance rate. Just 2 weeks later, she claimed that her home outside of Atlanta was her principal legal residence, where once again she got a state tax break, a lower mortgage rate, and a lower insurance rate. Incredibly, the Wall Street Journal, in an editorial, accuses Bill Pulte, the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, of targeting Ms. Cook. Why is this important? It's very simple. Today, on the Federal Board of Governors, there's a 5-4 vote against interest rate cuts for the American people. The criteria that the Federal Reserve is supposed to use in determining whether or not we cut interest rates are the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. But the truth is, both of them are either at the same level or lower than the place they were the last 4 times the Federal Reserve cut rates. Suddenly now, because Bill Pulte is enforcing the law, those on the hard left are going out of their minds. Let's listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Here's this guy, Bill Pulte, who has access to everybody's mortgage records because he's the head of the agency that was designed in the aftermath of the 2008 crash to make sure that we don't have widespread mortgage fraud. Remember when the banks and the mortgage brokers were out there selling those liar's loans and other loans? That's supposed to be the overall job of this agency. And here's someone who has taken access to this individual level data, and it would appear is running it against Donald Trump's enemies list to see if he can make a claim. I don't even know if it's true.
Here's the problem. Pocahontas, as I call her, someone who lied about her own ethnicity in order to get a scholarship to go to college, is wrong in the sense that all of the documents that Bill Pulte lists in his formal complaint to the Department of Justice are a simple matter of public record. Any citizen can go online and see the mortgage documents in question. So he isn't using secret or proprietary information to make the claim that Lisa Cook has engaged in mortgage fraud. It's also important to note that literally thousands of people are being charged with the same crime year in and year out. People at the fraud unit at the Federal Housing Finance Agency have found literally hundreds and thousands of people over the years who have engaged in the exact same crime. The only reason you don't know about it, of course, is because, well, they're not famous. Once again, here's Nancy Pelosi. Let's hear what she has to say.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of one of the bedrock principles of our economy, the independence of the Federal Reserve Board. For more than a century, the Federal Reserve has served as a cornerstone of the economic system of our country, tasked with safeguarding price stability, maximizing employment, preserving the health of our country, independent from political pressure, insulated from partisanship, and rooted in data and principle. Any of us who had economics in college or beyond knows that independence of the Fed is essential to the respect that our country commands in terms of our own economy throughout the world. The chairman of the Fed is the chair of the central banks, serves as a chair of the central banks globally, and it can't be a party hack.
If there's anybody a party hack, that would be Chairman Jerome Powell. How do we know that? Well, because he cut interest rates when the inflation rate and the unemployment rate were higher than they are today, first to try to assist in the election of Joe Biden, and then after the party dumped him, to try to assist in the election of Kamala Harris. So if there's anybody engaging in politics, that would be Chairman Powell. Frankly, I think former Speaker Pelosi needs to have another drink because the law is abundantly clear. The President of the United States has the authority to fire members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve for cause. Cause is most definitely insurance fraud and mortgage fraud, both of which Lisa Cook has engaged in. Now, Cook is currently being investigated by the Department of Justice for allegedly falsifying bank statements and property records to get better loan terms, and that would be a criminal charge. According to Director Pulte, as I say, Cook listed 2 properties, one in Georgia and one in Ann Arbor, Michigan, both as her principal legal residence. This is very similar to the exact same fraud allegedly perpetrated by Senator Adam Schiff, as well as New York Attorney General Letitia James. Schiff is particularly arrogant. He says the whole thing is made up. Well, anybody can go online and see that he said that his condominium in Burbank, California, was his primary legal residence. He got a state tax break, and he qualified for a lower mortgage rate and a lower insurance rate. At the same time, he said his home in suburban Potomac, Maryland, was his principal legal residence. And once again, he got a tax break and a superior and lower mortgage rate and interest rate. This is what is known as mortgage fraud. If there's anything that was made up, well, that would be the Russian collusion hoax. And he was one of the principal fraudsters in that controversy. It's amazing how the Democrats see weaponization when they saw no such weaponization when they made up an entirely false narrative regarding Russian interference in our 2016 election to aid in the president's election in that year. They basically conducted the greatest single dirty trick, the greatest single abuse of power in American political or governmental history. Here's Senator Mark Warner. He's yet another one of the Democrats who have completely speak in hypocrisy.
Well, back out on the road in Danville, Virginia this morning. But the big news overnight is Donald Trump, who clearly has no respect for the Constitution or separation of powers, is now trying to take over the Federal Reserve Bank by trying to fire, purely based on a charge with no evidence, one of the Federal Reserve Board members, Lisa Cook, who happens to be also the first African-American woman ever on the Federal Reserve. You may say, why does this make any difference? Well, if the Fed's independence is compromised, the ability to set interest rates, the ability to have an objective view of our economy will be taken up by Trump as well. This firing would give him a majority of the Federal Reserve Board members. We know he's been after the Federal Reserve Chair, Jay Powell, for ages, and a president's never fired a Federal Reserve governor, particularly here where there's a charge made, but no evidence has been presented. So it'll be interesting to see whether our friends in the business community, who always say they want to protect the independence of the Federal Reserve, will have the courage to stand up and push back. We'll all see. Stay tuned.
Perhaps Senator Mark Warner of Virginia can't read, because I can tell you definitively that Bill Pulte, the chairman or director, I should say, of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, has posted all of these documents online. That's because all of them are public information. Anyone can look at them. So when Senator Warner says that the allegations are made without any proof, it's very clear to me that he cannot read. Lastly, here is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, I think sums this up perfectly.
Is putting undue pressure on the Fed, and there are people like President Trump and myself who think a Fed official committed mortgage fraud, that this should be examined, and that they shouldn't be serving as one of the nation's leading financial regulators. And what we haven't heard from Ms. Cook is we haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." We haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." She just keeps saying the president can't remove her. The other thing, too, that I have called in the recent past for an internal review of all the Fed's operations, and I've encouraged Chair Powell to do this on an internal basis before there is an external review. And this is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed, because the Fed is an unaccountable institution, and its relationship with the American people depends on a high level of trust. And incidents like this puncture that trust. So President Trump is trying to make sure that anyone who serves at this institution has the trust of the American people.
Bully for the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Sounds to me like Ron Paul, who's been calling for an audit of the Fed for years. If you're just tuning in, this is the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Whatever you do, don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Well, Cracker Barrel has announced that they'll be taking the advice of President Donald Trump, and they're going back to their old logo after a widespread backlash against their bland new logo. After their new logo was unveiled to almost universal scorn and disgust, Trump said on Truth Social, Cracker Barrel should go back to the old logo, admit a mistake based on customer response, which is of course the ultimate poll, and manage the company better than ever before. They've got $1 billion worth of free publicity if they play their cards right. Now, this is very tricky to do, he said, but it's also a great opportunity. To their credit, Cracker Barrel took Trump's advice as they hope to go woke, go broke axiom does not end up applying to them. Cracker Barrel announced in their own X posting, we thank our guests for sharing their voices and their love for Cracker Barrel. We said we would listen, and we have. Our new logo is going away, and our old-timer logo will return. At Cracker Barrel, it's as it has always been and always will be. It's about serving up delicious food, warm welcomes, and the kind of country hospitality that feels very much like family. Cracker Barrel now has a chance for a reset. They can reverse course and go back to what made the brand into a national favorite. They can restore the old-timey decor and the features that made middle America fall in love with the brand. They need to end their sponsorship for the radical woke left pride events. It's time for Cracker Barrel to get back to the basics and become a brand that patriots and all Americans can enjoy again. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. I'm not going to Cracker Barrel for dinner tonight, but I might hit it for lunch tomorrow. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. We'll be back with more political news on the other side.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. We're back in the Stone Zone. Yes, today is my birthday, a date that I share with Lyndon Baines Johnson, who I famously exposed in my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ, way back in 2015. 6 different publishers told me that that book would never be a commercial sense, but it became an almost immediate New York Times bestseller. If you do order the book, folks, go for the paperback. It has 3 extra chapters. So there's a certain irony. I want to thank the hundreds, at this point it's the thousands of people who've sent me text messages, emails, and extended their birthday wishes. God bless you all, and many thanks. I'm 72 years old, but believe me, I'm just warming up. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is calling for RICO charges against the subversive network run by billionaire George Soros and his heir apparent son Alex as they fund left-wing activism and violence in the United States and across the globe. President Trump wrote in a Truth Social post, George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with racketeering because of their support for violent protests and much more all throughout the United States. We're not going to be allowed these lunatics to rip apart America anymore, never giving it so much as a chance to breathe and be free. I often wondered about this because it is absolutely provable that George Soros and his many nonprofits have actually paid people to make posts in social media advocating the assassination of the President of the United States. That is patently illegal. But unfortunately, we've had a 2-tier justice system in which we now know, thanks to the heroic efforts of Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, that there was a seditious conspiracy born in a White House meeting in 2017 in which the entire Russian collusion hoax was fabricated. It's amazing to me that Soros has never been prosecuted. There's a very famous CBS interview, you can still find it online, in which Soros says that the high point of his life was when he was collaborating with the Nazis to help them track down Jews in the systematic Holocaust that took place. So for far too long, the FBI has given a pass to Antifa-style groups and those covering for them, repeating their propaganda and refusing to properly investigate their funding apparatus and sources. This must all change. All points lead to George Soros. Soros founded the Open Society Foundation in 1979. It was an umbrella organization meant to fuel the spread of left-wing radicalism. He has undeniably been successful in his mission, but that success stops today. President Donald Trump has Soros in his crosshairs legally, and George Soros, at the ripe age of 95, may not be able to escape justice, but his son certainly will not. In the meantime, a transgender mass shooter has targeted Christian children in a Minnesota rampage. A mentally ill transgender maniac targeted a Catholic school in Minneapolis to go on a murderous rampage on Wednesday morning. The transgender shooter is allegedly a biological male named Robin Westman, who reportedly wrote "Kill Donald Trump" and "Where is Your God" on the Rifles magazine that included pro-LGBT Defend Equality stickers upon his deranged manifesto. His rampage left 2 children dead, 2 children in critical condition, and another 12 injured. Westman committed suicide after committing this cowardly ambush and attack. After the shooting, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey insulted and mocked people of faith by saying, "Don't just say thoughts and prayers." These kids were literally praying. This is the level of evil we're dealing with from the extremists in the far left of the Democrat Party. They spread propaganda so that mentally ill, transgendered people for years, radicalizing them by lying to them and telling them their rights are at risk when they aren't. Then, after they lash out against innocent children murdered because of their faith, the Democrat leaders attack Christianity as they attempt to grab their guns. We must stand boldly against this evil and must never sacrifice our fundamental rights. It is our constitutional rights that are under attack, not the imaginary rights of these individuals who choose to mutilate their own genitals. Meanwhile, the Democrat National Committee pays off Kamala Harris's massive presidential campaign debts. Now, it's always been shocking to me that the Democrats, who whined incessantly about the danger that Donald Trump and the Republicans posed to democracy, managed to dump an incumbent president of the United States and replace them with a nominee who was never selected or voted upon by any Democrat primary voter or any Democrat caucus attendee. The Democrat National Committee is now busy raising the funds not for the 2026 elections, but rather to pay off the debts from the failed, disastrous campaign of Kamala Harris. Incredibly, a recent book told us that Harris's advisors really misled her about the polling and about her prospects. She actually went into election night believing that she would be elected president, probably because no one who works for her would tell her the truth. This was the most disastrous presidential campaign in American history. A presidential campaign that's successful must have some positive, uplifting agenda for the American people. Donald Trump was very clear about his agenda, whether it was closing the borders, negotiating better tariff deals, cutting taxes, cutting government waste, and rebuilding our military strength. At the same time, appointing more conservatives to our judiciary. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris's campaign boiled down to 2 central messages. Donald Trump is Hitler, and if you vote for him, that means you must be a Nazi. Not very uplifting or positive for a campaign. It amazes to me that people like Beyonce and Oprah were paid literally hundreds, if not millions of dollars for their endorsements. Lee Greenwood, the country and Western music sensation superstar, endorsed President Donald Trump, sang at a number of his events and rallies, never charged the president a penny. It's unheard of. Even Al Sharpton charged Kamala Harris to be on his MSNBC show and receive his endorsement. The DNC has come to a private agreement with the Harris campaign that would cover her debts. They've already given $15 million to the campaign, but there's far more to go. The Harris campaign blew through a stunning $1.5 billion in what oftentimes looks more like a money laundering scheme than any kind of legitimate presidential run. So while the Democrat National Committee scrambles to pay off Harris's debts and donors, it becomes increasingly repulsed at the idea of throwing their money down the drain to establishment crooks. The Republican National Committee had an $80 million raised cash in hand by the end of the month of June. The DNC's malfeasance will only fuel the rise of Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Ayatollah Zoran Mamdani, and the insurgency that they represent. The socialists will use the corruption of the Democrat establishment to seize power over the entire party. It's only a matter of time, and we cannot laugh off this threat. We saw it firsthand in the New York Democrat primary for mayor. Recently, we had Sam Antar, the fraud investigator here in the Stone Zone, who proved it to us that rather than a grassroots uprising, rather than a people-powered revolution that took on the dark moneyed interests and the special interests, that Mamdani's campaign was financed by millionaires and billionaires and bundlers. And they used an interlocking series of nonprofits that under the IRS law are theoretically not supposed to be engaging in political activity. In fact, Sam Antar sent me a formal complaint that he had sent to the IRS today. It remains to be seen whether that body will act in time for the coming general election. The socialists will use the corruption of the Democratic establishment to seize power over the entire party, as they have in New York City. It's only a matter of time, and unfortunately, we cannot just laugh off this threat. The Russians laughed off the Bolsheviks, and look how that turned out for them. We must maintain eternal vigilance and be ready to fight against these enemies of America as they rise and become more formidable. Unfortunately, if the current trend continues, Zoran Mamdani will be the mayor of New York City. Just as New York City enacted cashless bail, as New York State did, Chicago followed suit, and we've seen the results there, where J.B. Pritzker and the mayor, Brandon Johnson, insist that the tyranny is if President Donald Trump mobilizes the National Guard to fight a crime epidemic in that city. So the president's very serious about the crime package that he's working on with Speaker Mike Johnson and Senator John Thune. He is the law and order president. I believe he will mobilize the National Guard in Chicago, which he can do by declaring a federal emergency. See, unlike D.C., where D.C. is not a state, the president has the authority to federalize the Metropolitan Police. The president does not have the assured authority in New York or in Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, or any other city where we're experiencing a crime epidemic. But he does have the right to mobilize the National Guard in Chicago. And already Mayor Brandon Johnson is calling on the people of Chicago to rise up and resist this tyranny. Tyranny. Why are these people against safe neighborhoods? Why are they against the gangs? Why are they against the crime spree that we see happening before our very eyes? In the meantime, the Pentagon is considering equity stakes in a major defense contractor. President Dwight Eisenhower warned us about this. Let's listen to him.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
That was one of our greatest presidents, Dwight Eisenhower, warning us about the military-industrial complex. Today, we call it the deep state. And I'll have more to talk about it when we come right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. You see, I played that clip of Dwight Eisenhower warning us about the military-industrial complex. That was 1952, the year I was born. It's because of this story. You see, White House Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said during a CNBC interview on Tuesday that the Pentagon is considering whether to purchase equity stakes in top corporate defense contractors. Lutnick stated accurately that Lockheed Martin is basically an arm of the U.S. government because it extracts most of its revenues from federal contracts. Lutnick stated that the Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense are currently thinking over the feasibility of direct government investment in the defense industry. Lutnick frames the move as a way for the government to get a better investment and stop getting ripped off by the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower was talking about, which, of course, theoretically, at least on paper, would be a good thing. However, this sort of a move could backfire and represent the unholy union of the Pentagon and the defense contractors, both of whom are incentivized, therefore, by their very existence to push for more war and more conflict throughout the globe. The revolving door that exists between the Pentagon and the defense contractors already exists and has not been good for peace or prosperity. This move to nationalize defense contractors could worsen the collusion that is already taking place between both corrupt entities. The Trump administration recently made a deal with Intel to buy nearly 10% of their stocks for the purposes of bringing jobs and industry back to America. The administration is considering other deals, but they should be very, very leery, in my opinion, of doing so with defense contractors that have lobbied for endless wars throughout the globe for many years. If there's any place to focus our attention, it would be on rare earth minerals. You see, the Chinese have gone out of their way to try to corner the international market on rare earth minerals, things that we need to build everyday things like computer chips and other high-tech products. So perhaps the administration should focus on rare earth minerals and how we can stop what is almost a communist Chinese monopoly on them today. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has threatened tariffs over digital taxation and regulation. Trump has laid down the gauntlet to nations that are imposing taxes and restrictions against U.S. tech companies, threatening them with large tariffs if they do not reverse their policies immediately. Trump wrote on social media, "I will stand up to countries that attack our incredible American tech companies. Digital taxes, digital services legislation, and digital market regulations are all designed to harm or discriminate against American technology. They also outrageously give a complete pass to China's largest tech companies. This must end, and it must end now," said the president. Last week, the United States and the European Union issued a joint statement that they would work towards reciprocal, fair, and balanced trade that would eliminate unjustified digital trade barriers, with both sides agreeing not to put customs duties on electronics transmissions. The EU also agreed not to levy network usage fees. It's a step in the right direction. With his statement, President Trump has shown that he will not accept the European Union welching on that agreement. He fully expects them to adopt these rules and stop discriminating against the American tech industry. This is part of President Trump's plan to achieve American tech dominance and to prevent China from dominating the nascent tech industry that is shaping up for the future of the world. I've known Donald Trump for 50 years. He's a man who means what he says and says what he means. He's also a man that, after Butler, Pennsylvania, has an incredible sense of urgency. He knows that he is blessed by the armor of God. He's protected. And I hope every American prays for his protecting. But he also knows that he only has 4 years to turn this country around. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Until tomorrow, we come back to bring you the latest political analysis. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?